Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery, and it's brought to you by two guys who are grateful for the ability to do this job.
Yes, we are.
Right?
Definitely.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well.
I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley.
Yeah.
Just for people who are joining us now.
Right.
I mean, after 3 years, there's probably people going like, well, maybe we'll give them a shot now.
We're kind of going on 3.5 at this point.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And we've got your sobriety date coming up in September
3rd, 2018, Memorial Day.
It'll be 4 years.
And actually I was talking to my kids about that because we often talk about my sobriety date.
Do you talk about how long your hair's getting?
It's getting long.
Do you ever talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I got a text this morning from my girlfriend.
You're looking a little bit like, what Twisted Sister? What's his name?
Dee Snider.
Dee Snider. Remember?
We're not going
to take long, blonde, curly hair?
No, so I got a text from my girlfriend this morning. She's like, hey, that's her son. Tate was supposed to get his haircut this Saturday, but he's not going to be able to make it. Do you want his appointment?
Hint, hint.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, I'll probably go check it out.
Let the flow grow.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. As a guy, that's the only real stuff I get to play with. You know what I mean? Is
right.
An accessory.
Yeah, if you're accessorizing beyond that, then that's a little weird.
Although I did just get some new TV glasses, and I can't wait to show you them.
Okay,
They're
nice.
Pretty awesome. But I was talking with my kids about my sobriety date, and I say it's September 3rd, 2018.
Right.
Truth be told, it's probably September 4th, because September 3rd, I was pretty wasted.
That's true. That was the last day you used, so the 4th is like the first
4th is
sober day.
Yeah. And that was a 4, and I don't even know if that counts because I was in detox and they were pumping me full of Ativan and
it counts.
all kinds of stuff. You know what I mean? But I wasn't drinking beer. And I've said this on the podcast before. Once I was in rehab, they were like, well, what did you drink before you went in? I was like, what do you mean? They go, yeah, you're supposed to drink or do before you go in. I was like, I didn't know that's a thing.
Oh, you mean like get drunk before you go into rehab, like one last hurrah?
Yeah, like when you walk in.
That's a bad attitude.
It's a bad attitude. When you walk into some detox facilities, you will see empty beer cans and bottles out there by the cars, and you know what I mean? People taking that last drink.
That's desperation, huh?
Or like that's not how I wanted to say goodbye to alcohol.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think I did a pretty...
Yeah, you got a bang-up job.
Yeah. Pun intended.
Yeah.
And so September 4th is really the sobriety day for me.
Right.
But September 3rd is the day that changed my life forever in a good way, as like we talked about last week on the podcast.
Right, yeah.
Every once in a while, I'm scrolling around on the internet and Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. When I say all the time I'm on there.
You're on there a lot, yeah. But
I found this meme, and I actually took a photo shot of it so I would remember to bring it up during the podcast.
Thank goodness, yes.
Because a photo shot.
A photo shot?
Yeah.
You mean a screenshot?
Yep. That's what I mean.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
All right, Dad.
And this is from an Instagram account called The Sober School. And there's a lot of sobriety.
Oh, I think I follow them too.
So I saw this and it really applied to me. And I was like, I want to talk to Dr. Matt about this. And here's it goes. I used to give alcohol so many different jobs. It had to make me happy, make me less anxious, help me calm down, help me have fun, help me party, and just make everything better. And somehow it never really worked. But I also used to give alcohol those jobs.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, actually.
And I was talking to somebody the other day about this, and alcohol was my only coping mechanism. It was the only tool that I had in my bag in case of emergency break and go for that. To be 45, and usually that was my only coping mechanism for life.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it seemed to be hand in hand. And I used to say beer was riding shotgun in my life, but truth be told, I was riding shotgun and beer was running my life.
Right. It's sort of like what you were saying last time. It's that term that you dislike, the functional alcoholic.
Yeah, I just think I know people are doing it, and I'm not saying that you can't have a life like that, but to me it seems like a sad life.
I think it is for sure. In fact, it's interesting that we're talking about this again. So we have, I don't know if we would call certain listeners of our shows like super listeners or mega listeners, the ones that never miss an episode.
Right.
We have quite a few of those. One of the ones that never misses an episode and always listens when she runs in the morning, her name's Heather. I think I've mentioned some of her comments before. And she wanted me to pass along to you that she also hates that term, functional alcoholic, like you were saying last time, for the same reasons you're saying. It's sad. It's not really functional. It's like the way you just described that is if your only coping mechanism is in a bottle or in a pipe or one of those sorts of things, are you really functional? Like the alcohol can't do all those jobs that the meme just pointed out. You need to be learning how to do all those jobs. And we need to have healthy. I don't even really like the idea of coping mechanisms. I know that the Band-Aids are important in life.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that I do get a little irritable about is people will meet me and they'll say, "Oh, so what do? You teach people coping mechanisms, coping skills." And I always feel like, well, maybe as much as nurses hand out Band-Aids, like I do a lot more than that, I hope. I hope real therapy, real recovery means that we're making real changes. So being a functional alcoholic implies you're an alcoholic and you're barely functioning, and you're not changing, you're not improving. And then coping skills sort of implies that we're just trying to get by as well. So we want to make real change. And that's, I think, the distinction between sobriety and recovery. Sobriety might be a coping skill, like I'm staying sober, and hats off to people that can stay sober. But there's more, right? There's so much more than just being sober. There is living a life in recovery.
Well, you think about it, a nurse puts a Band-Aid on it. Why does it put the Band-Aid on it? Because, one, to stop the bleeding. And then they're going to do an internal check, and then they're going to do a whole body check and try to figure out how that happened. Right. So, yeah, we've got to stop the bleeding. And if that's what we're doing at first, I get that. So it's a
first-line treatment, right?
Yeah.
But then we want to go, what else is there?
Yeah. Like, I say this all the time, and I hope people don't ever get tired of it. I remember sitting down in my therapist's office, and he goes, "Do you want me to blow your mind?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I'm in rehab. Blow my mind." He goes, "Drinking's not your problem." And I'm like, "What? Pretty sure drinking's my problem. That's why I'm in rehab." He goes, "No, your problems are your problems. And drinking has been your solution." Right. He goes, "Now drinking has become a problem because your body's addicted to it, but your problems are your problems. And we've got to figure out what those are and how to help those, or you're going to fall back into your same routine."
And you weren't treating your problems because you were putting it all on alcohol to do it.
Yeah.
And so the alcohol becomes its own problem. Yeah.
Became a Band-Aid.
No, I think that's very insightful.
And eventually it couldn't hold it back. And it was horrible.
And it became its own issue.
So once again, I really love this. And you know what I love, and that I've noticed even more and more after each year we've done this podcast, is when I'm out and about and people come up and talk about recovery, talk about the things they're doing. 3 years ago, people weren't as willing to talk about recovery as they are today. And maybe it's just because my circle's gotten bigger, but I feel like a lot of people are celebrating recovery and living out loud.
I would say culturally, here in the state of Utah and around the nation, it's really weird. Just in the last 5 years, there has been this positive explosion of conversation, people, places, everything on the internet that's embracing and supporting recovery. So the conversation is much more natural and easy now. And I really do think if you look back on just the number of recovery centers, the number of types of programs, the number of media outlets like this podcast and television shows, in the last 5 years, it's just been exponential growth. And I think that's because people are finally tired of hiding it. And the people like we have on our show and you and others who are living this beautiful life in recovery, you just want to share that. Like anytime you have something great, you want to share it. Now there's so many outlets. So I'm grateful to be part of it because you're right. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I mean, back when we were in college, nobody ever wanted to talk about it.
I remember, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the podcast, is I used to get drunk and watch the TV show Interventionist.
I know. It's so awesome.
and so,
I mean, that just, I could chew on that all day.
I would watch it, and in my head, I was like, so I'm preparing myself for in case this ever happens. You know what I mean? Like, I was doing homework, you know what I mean?
Just in case.
Yeah, just in case. But in my messed up mind, that's really kind of what I was doing. I was like, so they're going to say this, and I'm going to say this, and they're going to come at me.
Get ready for the test.
Yeah, they're going to come at me with this information and be like, okay, I've seen the movie. I know what you guys are trying to do.
Yeah.
You know, don't put a mic on me and make me go to some weird hotel and stand in a lobby because I know what's coming. And I'm not going to do this because I don't have a problem. You know, but even back then I used to watch it and it was more of like I watched it because it was a train wreck. But the weird thing is I love to watch the beginning. Because I like to see who these people really were. Because they give you a good... And it's kind of how we do the show. You know, what the early life was like. And before their addiction.
Background, yeah.
And then I would fast forward it during the middle. Because it was so messy and train wrecky. And made me feel so icky. And I just hurted so much for the family.
A little too real, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I always fast forwarded to the end to see how they were doing.
Ending,
and then I remember I'd wait. And it always made me mad. Because they would check the people into rehab... And then they would roll the credits. And then at the end of the credits, their thing would pop up and say, John Smith's been sober for 13 days, or relapsed after 90 days.
And the follow-up.
The follow-up was just horrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I always felt like they exploited that middle part, the train wreck and the life dissolving and all that.
I think that you're right. That was kind of the market that people wanted to tune in and see that. Yeah.
And so that's why I want this podcast to celebrate more about the recovery and less about the train wreck. Now, I think the train wreck is important because I like to let people know that as bad as your life has gotten, it can get better.
Well, I do think there's some value in that. Like it is good to see that. Yeah, like the contrast between the low lows, and we've had some people share some pretty low lows on our show.
Stuff where we've looked at each other and was like, whoa.
Yeah, because I think listeners of the show understand a lot of what we talk about is fresh news to us, right? Well, like we want it to just be a new conversation.
Yeah.
So we don't know the background. So that contrast can be helpful if a person's in a state of mind where they're like, I can't do it. My story's too bad. And they hear someone else's story and they're like, maybe I can do it.
Well, I remember being in recovery and sitting in the process group with 15 other people and somebody holding on to this secret and, this thing that they've been carrying around for years that they feel like just makes them a horrible person. Mm-hmm. And finally watching them get it off their chest and process this in a group and then have them realize, wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And it doesn't, maybe I'm not a horrible person.
Right.
Maybe other people have done similar things, but when you're an addict deep in your addiction, you isolate yourself and you close off the rest of the world and you think just these horrible thoughts about yourself and you start to believe them.
Which contributes to use, right?
Yeah, it does.
Because you feel bad and so you use more.
Yeah. I mean, how many times do we have people on this podcast who have said, well, this is just going to be me, so I'm going to be the best drug addict I can be.
Oh, tons.
And you know what? Yeah. And I'm going to just do it better than anyone has ever done it.
I had a new patient recently, a very bright person, graduated from a very prestigious university not too long ago. And he basically said the same thing. He said, when I was off to college and had a hard time making friends and a hard time meeting girls, I figured if I could party harder than anyone else, then everyone would like me. And that was his downfall. That was that addict mentality of like, if I can just be the best at this, then everything else will fall into place. Of course, everything else fell apart. Right.
And that's usually how it goes. And that's what makes addicts so wonderful in the world of business as well as the world of addiction. It's that all-in mentality.
We've had so many entrepreneurial people in recovery and they're very successful because, that personality traits are kind of funny because they can be used for your benefit or your detriment, right?
Yeah.
And when the addiction's involved and you're an all or nothing person, watch out. But if you're living a life of recovery and you're an all or nothing person, watch out because good stuff's going to happen.
Remember the guest we had on who streamlined the gang business?
Yeah, she was like the gang accountant, right? She came in, she's like, "Let me tell you what you're doing wrong."
It was like, "Whoa!" She started working for multiple gangs.
Yeah, I don't know how you get away with that. I guess she didn't, but I mean that kind of entrepreneurial, thinking. Yeah, just applied maybe in the wrong way.
Well, our guest today's name is Ryan Brown, and I was going to say Brene Brown, but you credit her to some of your recovery.
Yeah, she's my hero.
You love her.
I love her.
And we're going to find out more about Ryan Brown's story in just a second. You're listening to Project Recovery. Hey, welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. Our guest today is Ryan Brown. Now, I met Ryan Brown, right out of rehab?
Yeah, like a year ago.
You were out of rehab? Or I was out of rehab?
No, I was.
And I just barely got out of rehab.
Yeah, my sobriety date is March 8th. So it was a year and a couple months.
He came up to me to the Maverick and he thought I was still on TV, didn't know that I was fresh out of recovery. We started talking.
Yeah.
He told me he was. I said, I'd like to get you on the show. He said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be on your show.
Right.
And I was like, well, when you're ready, I'd love to have you on. So I reached out to him and I said, are you ready? And you said?
I said, of course.
All right. So where does the story of Ryan Brown begin?
Ryan Brown began in Farmington, Utah. I grew up LDS, a good family. Nothing wrong with my childhood. I remember when I first went to counseling and this therapist was headstrong on, no, we got to find that childhood trauma, right? And I was like, but there's none. There's literally none.
Yeah.
Like my dad got mad at me once really loudly, or like my mom got
But you know what?
rid
But I think that needs some attention, because there's a lot of people who have fallen into addiction not because of trauma,
Right.
but because of other reasons. And sometimes everybody wants to blame it on trauma. What happened to you as a kid?
Yeah.
What, was your dad not there? Was your mom not there?
Some therapists, unfortunately, have a real bias towards that because of their training. Mm-hmm. And I'll remind the listeners that not all being a therapist is not a degree. Lots of different people with different training backgrounds can become therapists. And so a lot of therapists have that bent that you must have some trauma in your background. Mm-hmm. And many people do.
However,
there's a lot of things that happen post-childhood that can cause anxiety, depression, or cause a person to fall into substance abuse. So it sounds like you had sort of an idyllic childhood.
Really,
you have a big family.
One brother, one sister. I was the oldest. A lot of people talk about being the oldest and having to be the perfectionist. Like you are counted on to be, the example, right? And for the most part, I was.
What decade did you grow up in? Because
I graduated in 97.
97
from Beaumont.
So you were a kid through the 80s and 90s. Yeah. And I bring that up because for anybody who's not familiar with the geography of Utah, Farmington, as it sounds, was pretty small town back then. North of Salt Lake. It's much more commercial now than it used to be. Mm-hmm. But it kind of makes sense that you were not only growing up with a nice, stable, supportive family, but probably in a nice, stable, supportive community.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's the truth. Not that there weren't problems back in those days, but Farmington was kind of a small town.
Yeah. And I think you've had a couple of guests on here from the Farmington.
Oh, yeah. We've had a couple from Farmington, from Ogden, from Salt Lake, from Provo, from Morgan. I mean, that's the thing, is addiction doesn't discriminate. And a lot of people think that because
big city, small town, doesn't matter.
It doesn't. Yeah. And so you said you grew up pretty good, but as the oldest child, you had this kind of perfectionist attitude?
I always did. I always had that. I have to be the best. And my love was basketball. So I wanted to do everything I could to be on the basketball team, And in junior high, I didn't make the basketball team. And it was devastating, because I don't know how I compare myself, but like I thought I was going to make the basketball team, and I didn't. And
I think Michael Jordan got cut one year too, so don't feel bad. Don't feel bad.
Yeah, I mean, so it was one of those things where I had setbacks in life. I always got really good grades. Like I was 3.93 all through high school, and
that was like Casey.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
No, you didn't.
No, I didn't.
But good grades, you don't.
What was that like missing? Sorry, Casey. What was that like not making the basketball team though? It wasn't a trauma, but what was that like for a kid?
Oh, it's when that's your whole focus, right? You don't have work to do. You're out there shooting hoops like 24/7.
Good old days,
yeah,
right?
Just shooting.
That was your purpose.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I mean, grades were always there. But like the thing that I wanted to prove myself with was basketball, because girls go to basketball games. Like you're a popular kid,
Hey, it's good to be on the basketball team.
Yeah,
it's been a recipe for success for men for a lot of years.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to do. And so when I didn't make it in junior high, I was like, man, I got to work harder. I do remember thinking that.
But see, that's a unique outtake on that, because
that's a resilient attitude.
Because a lot of people are like, well, I'm not doing this then, and then they're going to go find something else.
Quit and give up.
Yeah, but you said you got to work harder.
Yeah, that's kind of my MO throughout addiction too. Like, I got to just do it better, do it harder.
Again, you can see how certain traits can work for you or against you.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So you worked harder.
Yeah.
Did you make the team?
Made the team in high school. Yeah. So
that's impressive, actually.
And it wasn't like, I remember I was in the band at the time because I played drums, and I didn't want to excel at drums. I just was like something else to do, some other hobby. And when I made the basketball team, it was over the PA at Beaumont, and I just jumped up screaming and like, yeah, I finally did it.
Excited.
I'm here,
Yeah.
And then, I rode the bench a lot, and I was on the sophomore team, barely played, but just to be on the team.
Yeah,
right?
but you're
just
there.
To be on the team.
Well, that bounce back, anybody who's familiar with high school athletics, especially nowadays, if you're not in that crowd that makes the team in the junior high years, it's pretty unlikely you're going to be in the crowd that makes the team in your high school years. And basketball, to your credit, is one of the harder ones to make the high school team on because they have so few players.
Yeah.
It's not like a football team where you've got 40 people on the team, right? And so I think basketball is one of the hardest sports to make the team.
Yeah, I wasn't very good at math apparently. Because when you do the math on it, you're like, oh, that's a lot of people trying out. That's a lot, you know,
for a few spots.
Yeah, for a couple spots.
So you made the high school basketball team. At any point in your high school career, did you try alcohol? Did you try drugs?
No, I had one sip. Like I actually had some friends that had problems with addiction, had problems with alcohol and drugs, but I was always the designated driver. That was my role, you know. And again,
so you had friends that partied, but you didn't party.
And I would go to parties and be like, hey, let me get you home, you know, let me be that guy. And I was comfortable with it. I didn't particularly like the taste of alcohol the time I tried it, and it was just like not for me, you know. And then it was through high school. I did have a friend kill himself after a relapse, after rehab.
So in high school, while he was still in high school. Wow.
Yeah. And so that really affected me. That actually was something that was hard for me to understand because we had talked about going on a mission together. We'd worked out together. We were pushing weights every day, trying to be bigger, faster, stronger. And I went to a volleyball competition in Colorado, and I got a call from his parents, and it was rough.
What was his drug of choice? What was he using?
It was a lot. It was anything that he could get his hands on to, but
we call that polysubstance.
Yeah, I mean,
abuse.
marijuana was a big one. Alcoholic, just anything that you could get high off of, basically.
That changes you as a young person, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you could see it in him, you know. And then when he went to rehab and then came home and then had a relapse, like that's the last thing that. Then it's like I'm a failure, you know, and I could see that in him.
How do you think it changed you having a friend commit suicide?
I didn't want anything to do with it. Like I remember going to the funeral and in my head thinking, all those guys that are here celebrating Tori's, you know, being here for Tori, celebrating his life, they need to get their act together. I remember thinking that,
because they used
shaming them in my head.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, and so you blamed the substances for his death.
Yeah,
yeah,
and a little bit of the enablers.
Yeah, the enablers.
And again, didn't know much about addiction or anything at that point. So,
I mean, that is a traumatic event, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
But it seems like it was a warning sign from you to stay away, which it seemed like you inevitably did.
It worked for a long time. Like I used his passing as, like, don't touch the stuff. Do not touch it.
So you end up graduating high school. Mm-hmm. Move on to
went to USU for a semester. Again, I was the designated driver. I was even in the Sigma Chi, Russian Sigma Chi, and I was the dude that people could call up at 3 a.m. and say, "Hey, I'm at the White Owl. Come and get me."
You know, I'm a Sigma Chi from Utah State.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I probably helped you a couple of times.
Probably. And, you know, but
it's a small world.
So you're up there and you're designated driving for everybody there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Case, like the White Owl was the
hot spot.
The
Go there and
only
get a
spot,
big dog
really.
and a burger.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And so then I was willing to do that because I had a friend that passed. You know, I was like, I can be that person. I can help somebody that might, you know, need help.
So that stayed with you and started to form, it sounds like a little bit of your identity. Like, I'm a guy who doesn't do that, and in fact, I'm a guy who's going to help the guys who do it.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem like you were judging anybody for their choices.
No. I mean, a little bit in my head, you know, a little bit like oh, they could be doing better. They could be doing better with their lives. Like, that's a talented person. You shouldn't be doing that. Mm-hmm. You know, they should use that energy towards good.
Well, on the surface, that there's some truth in that, right? Like,
it's honest. I wasn't expecting that honest answer. You know what I mean?
That's a very honest.
He's gonna be like, yeah, no, I don't judge him. He's like, no, I was a little in my head. You know?
But
it's like, whoa.
I like that, Ryan. I like the fact that you're honest because that is what we think. And there is an element of truth in that. Like if you see a talented friend who's kind of getting drunk and using drugs all the time and diminishing their talent, there's some element of truth in that. But I think then, like you and like me growing up and most people, if you don't have an education about addiction and how it works and substance abuse and all of that, then that's kind of where our understanding of the person stops.
Yeah,
right?
and I think
and so we stay kind of judgmental instead of, if we really understand the whole thing, it's more complex, but it helps us not be judgmental.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I always thought of it as a moral failure. Like they're choosing to do this.
Right. And that's how most of us, I don't know, I don't mind admitting that's how I grew up thinking about it.
Yeah. And so for me, like, and including when I was in my addiction, like people would be like, just, you've got kids, man, like figure it out. Like it's
just stop.
Yeah. Just stop. And at that point in college, before I went on a mission, it was just like, hey man, like you ever think about just not doing that? Oh. I'm in college. I'm 21 years old, 19, 18, whatever. This
is what I want to do.
This is the time to do it, bro.
Yeah, and a lot of college students would say that this is the time to do it. You just don't know if you're going to end up getting bit with the addiction bug.
For sure.
So you're up at USU. You decide to go on a mission.
Yeah, I went to Hong Kong on a mission. Served a 2-year mission. Loved it. I was a successful missionary, so I loved every bit of it. And I came home and...
That sort of fits your personality, though, like service-oriented, right? Like you wanted to be the designated driver. You like to help others.
This time you're driving people to God.
Yeah. That I think part of it is wanting to be the best at whatever that is.
Yeah.
And like you were saying earlier, whatever that... if I'm already in it...
I'm all in.
I'm all in.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm thousands of miles away from home. I might as well make the best of it. And that's what I did.
You came back and successful missionary.
Successful missionary. Broke up with my longtime girlfriend and
after the mission.
Yeah. Well, she kind of broke up with me. It wasn't really my choice.
Yeah. There you go. Okay.
I get that.
Again, an honest answer. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, she actually broke up with me. I didn't have a choice.
I mean, I thought that I was coming home to a girlfriend. Let's put it that way.
But you came home and where'd you go to school?
I went directly to the U, and I was working for a billing company, and then going to school full time. So I was preoccupying my day with as much in a day as possible. Met Sarah, and we clicked really early, and we got married within 6 months. And we had 4 kids. Within short times, we wanted to be perfect parents as well. Like perfection is the underlying theme here. Like just checking the box and doing everything that we're supposed to, and then
everything you thought you were supposed to.
Exactly.
I mean, because that's the thing that sometimes gets us in trouble is I'm doing what I'm supposed to. Well, says who?
We call them shoulds.
Yeah,
shoulds.
We grow up a lot with these things that we're taught.
Milestones.
And we think, well, we should do this, we should not do that. And
the world's not cutting.
Most things are not that way, and most people don't really own their own shoulds.
Yeah.
So we adopt shoulds from things that we're taught. And that can feel burdensome later on in life when you feel like I have to do all these things, but I don't know if I really want to do them.
Yeah.
Right.
And if I haven't done them by this time, am I a failure?
Yep, there's that. I should have done this by a certain date or a certain time.
Yeah, I mean, coming off a mission.
Yeah, well,
you get that talking
so
to.
people that are not familiar with the LDS Mormon culture is that there's some shoulds there. When you're 19 back in the day, now it's 18, you should go on a mission and do that for a couple of years. And when you get home, you should find a person to marry, and then you should start having as many kids as you can have right away.
Yep.
And so you were doing all that.
Yep. Checking the boxes, man.
4 kids in how long?
2002, and then my youngest is 10. So, yeah, I mean,
2011.
Yeah, it's pretty succinct, right?
Yeah.
You were
Planned
busy.
Parenthood.
You were busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had a plan, had a goal.
Yeah, so so then what happened was I started a company. I started this business called Ideal Practice, where I'd help medical providers get in network with insurances. and it was going really well. And at first it wasn't. No small business goes really well at the start, but it was going really well, and I was doing well. And
if it's going, a small business,
yeah, exactly.
If it's going,
it was
you're doing
going
something
to
right.
the next step. And then we bought a house and moved in and got our own house. I mean, that was a big deal. That was another should. That's a
Absolutely,
should.
yeah.
Right. And then got a position in the church as a young men's advisor. Mm-hmm. And we went snowboarding, night snowboarding. I was the fun one also.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah.
Like young men's, like being in charge of the
youth program.
Yeah, the youth program
Yep.
at 16, 17, 18. That was my jam, right? So let's
go skiing, let's go cliff
skiing.
jumping,
Yeah,
let's
let's
go-
do that stuff. Zions, all the fun stuff, right? So we went night skiing one night, and I was showing off, and I used to be really good at snowboarding, and I was on a rail that iced over at Brighton, and my board came out from underneath me, and I broke my back.
Ooh.
Just smashed my back. Like
You landed
you've
on
seen
the
those
rail?
like Star Wars when they burst a star? That was like my bones on an X-ray. It was like fragments everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
So, I actually went because I didn't want to give up. I actually finished that night skiing.
Oh my gosh.
I'm dead serious.
You're a warrior.
Yeah, and then the next day, could not walk, could not even get up out of bed. I was in so much pain. And again, being with doctors as clients, and most of my clients are my friends. Like I just talk to them like they're just my friend. And I remember going to this drug rep had, they would do these lunches and stuff.
Yeah.
Remember going to this lunch, and it's fully catered. It's like
They're not allowed to do that as much nowadays.
Yeah.
But I remember being in graduate school, and if there was you'd hear like, oh, there's a drug rep lunch. We didn't care what it was about because they would have really good food, hot food, lots of giveaways, pens and soccer balls and
bunch
hats.
of dudes at an estrogen pill party. Huh?
Exactly. Exactly.
We're here, man.
Yeah. So those were fun events back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah, so I went to one of those, and I think like Ruth's Chris or something was
it was
on the
always,
menu.
like,
It was
top
always
shelf.
top notch.
Yeah.
And it was the oxycontin rep, and from Purdue, and he came in, and he was talking to my doctor, my client, and also my friend, and saying, "Hey, this is for pain management. This is like giving your patients Tylenol. It's got the effects of like a Lortab, but it's non-addictive."
Oh, this was the rep.
I literally heard that. I heard it.
They used to say that, right?
And
that's
so
the 1% addictive.
when people see like Dope Sick and go, that couldn't have been like that.
It was.
I saw it myself,
Yeah.
And so I remember walking out of that, and my doctor friend saying, "That's what we should get you on. Like that would help your back a ton." Because I still had to move, and I wasn't giving myself enough rest because I had a business, I had family to provide for. And if you ever break a back, man, it does not like to heal because you're always moving it. It's not like when you cast an arm and you can isolate it and let it grow and come back.
Once a person has a serious back issue, it's kind of hard to not always feel like you have a back issue.
Yeah, and I just remember the first prescription that I got was like, I am out of pain. I am not only out of pain, but I'm feeling really, really good. Like it was immediate. Like this overwhelming euphoria, this overwhelming sense of just bliss, like peace.
But prior to that, had you had any like anxiety or anxiousness in your marriage? I mean, other than that, if people would have asked you before the back break, "Hey, Ryan, how's life going?" What would you have said?
Oh, it's going exceptionally well, no matter what.
Yeah.
Like Brian's 2 thumbs up.
Yeah.
That was me.
But were you feeling the 2 thumbs up in your life? No, you weren't.
No, I mean, we don't talk about like the bad days, right? Like if a clerk at Maverick says, "How you doing today?" You're like, "Great,
Good.
Man, you?"
Yeah.
Good. It's because I got to get out of here.
But
right?
you're always blown away when they were like, "Not good."
No,
I just
like,
lost
well,
my
I'm feeling
mother,"
a little melancholy.
Yeah. If they use that word, I'll be blown away.
Yeah.
But it was always just like going to the next thing. I didn't really get to connect, and it was this perfectionism of like, don't let people see you other than having a good day.
I would say I'll give you my profile of you, Ryan, is one of those very optimistic, forward-thinking, lots of energy, outgoing personalities with that perfectionistic. So when you hit roadblocks, you kind of like to just blow past them.
Right.
It wasn't sit and dwell on it, talk about it. It's like, okay, moving on.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is part of the recipe to a lot of people's big-time success in life, especially in business. But you're a young guy, you have little children, you have a new marriage and a new business. So I can also say there's a ton of stress heaped in there, and I would imagine that because you didn't have the background to know how to give yourself relief from that, you just go, accomplish. That was your coping mechanism. Then when this OxyContin came along, boom. And I love the fact that you mentioned the pain relief a little bit. Mostly you used words like euphoria, right? Because that's the thing about that drug is the emotional change that a person has.
The release.
It's like you probably didn't even know that's possible.
Oh,
right?
I had no. I mean, you'd hear about people getting high and stuff, and I'd see my friends and they're feeling good, but feeling great, like exceptionally well, like this new level of life, and all of a sudden, things that I cared about went away. Like I didn't care about what work email I had to do or what. All these stresses, I had to make sure that money was coming in and expenses were going out. Like it was, none of that mattered, right? And to me, it was like, I've got a solution. You talk about alcohol being your one tool. And for me, I feel like I didn't have any tools until I found OxyContin. Then it was my one tool, right? And then that became so bad that I wasn't, you're chasing the high, right? I got to the point where...
Wait, I'm going to stop you right there because you're listening to Project Recovery. You just heard Ryan talk about the first time he took an oxycontin pill. We're going to find out where that goes. You're listening to Project Recovery. Welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. Our guest today is Ryan Brown. He just described the first time he took an oxycontin pill for a broken back. And the word he used was euphoric. And it wasn't pain relief. You said it a little bit, but you were really kind of focused on the euphoric feeling that it gave you.
Yeah.
And then you said you were about to go into how it got out of control. How does one pill lead to a mess?
Well, you're chasing the high, right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about when we're chasing a high. Like we felt that one time.
What's crazy is, though, I don't think everybody knows about chasing the high. And it's kind of what's really, well, there's a lot of things wrong with the addiction world. But when you chase the high, that means you need to take more drugs to get the same effect. And so you start to build up a tolerance in your body. So to get that same high where 3 beers used to do it for me, it had to become 6. And then 6 would become 12.
That experience you had that first time you took the pill, at least physiologically, you never had that same experience twice.
Never.
Because that particular drug is so powerful that your brain immediately maps it and wants more of it. And so even if it's just a little by little, you need more and more to try to get there. And so chasing is actually the key word in that phrase. You're always behind.
Yeah, I was always behind. And the thing that your brain does, and I remember this, and this is complete honesty. I remember thinking my back hurts worse, like, and I don't know if it did or not. Like I really don't know. Maybe the OxyContin was masking it, so I was doing more stuff and it was hurting worse. But I do remember going back to the doctor and saying, "Hey man, this isn't cutting it." Well, it was for a time, and then. You get up and up and up and up. And finally, he came to me and he said, "Dude, my DEA is on the line for you." And I'm like, whoa, because that was something that just hit me like, what are you talking about? Like the DEA?
The problem is you were, like all of us, trusting.
Yeah.
And the doctor was even trusting, and this drug rep was trusting that the information he was given was correct. And he's out like towing the company line saying what he was told to say, and all of it was lies.
Yeah.
right? All of it was lies, and it trickles down to the person who's using the medication. And then you do come back confused, like, well, this was supposed to do this for me, but now I feel this way. And I'm asking for more or better, and you're telling me I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah, and that's where I was like, what are we talking about? We're talking about the same drug that, we had the Purdue guy there and da-da-da-da-da.
Bruce Chris, don't you guys remember?
Yeah,
we were all there.
You guys were all there.
And a juicy steak.
And now you're talking about the DEA, like about ready to shut you down because of me? Oh, man, that like hit me hard. Because then it was just like, oh, I do have a problem. Right?
Is that the first inclination that you had a problem?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I actually had passed out a couple of times and would have seizures and not wake up and stuff like that. Yeah, and you would think that
seizure didn't wake up. Yeah,
just stuff like that. You're like, well, it's
that's
part
not
of the process.
normal stuff, right?
Well, at the time, I thought it was just like something else.
Yeah.
Dehydrated or sleep
the
deprived.
addict brain will trick you and manipulate you to think different things because what it doesn't want to admit is that you've got a problem.
Because then you've got to take away that tool.
Yep.
Right. And I didn't want anybody taking away the tool. But when I started doing this whole, this is a client that is a friend. I don't want anything to happen. Like if I hurt myself, that's one thing. But if I'm hurting other people,
right,
especially a license, like I don't want anything to do with that. So he gave me a new prescription. He said, hey, this is kind of like you're maxed out right here. So I went to Lake Powell with my family, with extended family, and that could not get out of my brain. Could not.
And this was your last.
I took a full bottle of oxycontin and I threw it in Lake Powell. And I remember thinking, what have I done? I had no idea what detox was. I didn't know anything other than there it goes, right? And then I'm thinking, well, maybe it will float. And then it just,
You're hoping. I love that. The immediate regret of throwing that off the boat.
Oh, I think it will float. Didn't never come up, right? It's down in
so now you're detoxing in Lake Powell with extended family.
Well, that's cold. You forced cold turkey on yourself. Right?
Forced it. Yeah. And I didn't know because I always had an ample supply. So I didn't actually know what detox felt like.
Or withdrawals.
Yeah, like withdrawals, just the worst, skin crawling, worst.
Up to this point, did your beautiful wife, Sarah, have any idea that you were abusing these or using these? Or
Well, she thought, to be quite honest and fair, she thought it was just the doctor giving it to me. And I was just using it as prescribed.
Yeah.
Every once in a while I would cheat, but for the most part, I was actually using it as prescribed. Because again, I knew that if I ran out of them, I was in trouble, right? So for the most part, there was a few times that I was like, it's been a long day, take an extra one.
But to be fair, the prescription regimen back then was much different than it is now.
Yeah,
so
sure.
They thought, because of the misinformation that was being spread about the drug, that you could prescribe a lot more. So by today's standards, I would dare guess you were overprescribed, even though at the time you were taking it as prescribed.
Correct.
Let me ask, how many pills a day do you think you were using at your height?
Well, it became like the max milligrams, like whatever that was. I think it was 60 or 80.
I think it's 80.
80. And it was 80, and it was like 6 times a day,
Oh, my goodness. And see, nowadays we would look at that and go, oh, wow, that's abuse.
Yeah, that's abuse.
Way too much.
Yeah. And that's what would cause,
the seizures.
The seizures.
And the passing out.
And the not waking up. And,
So walk me through the detox, the withdrawals that you went through on the beautiful shores of Lake Powell.
Lake Powell is not a certified detox center, right?
I didn't even know what detox was. I didn't even know that there was a place that you could go to help you down from death.
Because we've had people on the podcast who said they feared withdrawals. They welcomed death. I mean, that statement right there blows your mind. It was like, hey, look, bring on death because I welcome death. I want death. I do not want to withdraw.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, at least I'm in Lake Powell where when I get hot, I'll jump in the lake. And when I'm cold, I'll go on the boat. I would try to regulate my temperature and that awful skin crawling, that just like sick feeling, and your stomach is just in knots, and death. Like it was honestly, I thought death was a better answer.
So at some point, did you have to come clean with the family?
Yeah. And so I told Sarah what I'd done, and she was like, okay, we're kind of away from everything. And again, nobody knew really how to help me other than just like keep me as comfortable as possible with Gatorade and Otter Pops, and just try to, keep me hydrated basically, so that my body could just expel it. So after that happened, after that week, and that week was hell, I didn't want anything to do with it. Like I would have surgeries and toothaches and all that kind of stuff, and they'd be like, "Oh, here's some Lortab." No, thank you. Like I don't want any of that, because I had such an amazingly bad experience with
nice save.
Yeah, with the personal detox.
Yeah,
that it was to this day, it's freshly like right in my memory. Like
we call that one trial learning.
Yeah,
when something is so miserable
bad
that it makes a lasting impression.
But I don't think that's why you're here on the podcast, because it sounds like you went back out again.
Well, so what happened was I got myself clean, right? And then I'm like, I'm just never touching that stuff. And then I went a period of about 5 years where I was like completely sober, and I'm like, ooh, that was a near miss, right? And then I got enough time where I got some of that ego back, and some of the stressors that came into my life. And I remember going to the liquor store to buy sake for a Japanese recipe, and I was like, I wonder what that tastes like. Like years later, like this is like at 36 years old or 37 years old or whatever. Going to the liquor store for.
So you weren't drinking at the time. You just happened to be making a recipe that called for sake.
Yeah, and you cook it out, right?
In the state of Utah, you have to go to the liquor store for that. And so you went there and all of a sudden had the voice, I wonder what that tastes like.
Yeah, I wonder what that tastes like. So I drank it, the whole bottle.
All or
Casey's
nothing.
like looking at me like, are you sure?
Look, I'm an alcoholic, so I know little things about alcohol. Like, sake's not an introduction alcohol. You know what I mean? That's not something that people start with.
And this is how you know how honest this is because I had no idea.
Yeah.
Right? I had no idea. So the sake was just like, the feeling came rushing back, and it felt a lot like that euphoria that I remembered from the oxycontin.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, hello, old friend.
Yeah.
And then it was just like it was so fast to the races with that. It was like I had no idea how to calibrate it. I had no idea what one beer versus 1 pint versus a liter of vodka. No idea.
But you were off to the races.
I'm just drinking to get out of me, right?
Yeah.
And then it became, again, kind of chasing the high and waking up in the morning and going, this is how you start a day, right? Like with the liter of vodka.
A couple shots, get going.
Oh, shots, nothing.
Liters.
Yeah.
So you started heavy drinking right away.
Mm-hmm.
At the age of 37.
AM drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was like, well, I'm still a functional alcoholic. I haven't lost any jobs. I haven't lost any clients. I haven't, and really I had this network of people around me that was, I wouldn't call them enablers. That's kind of a harsh word for it, but they, in essence, they're enabling it because they're covering for me. They're that catch net that's like, okay, well, if Ryan really messes up, then we can cover for him. And it wasn't necessarily cover as much as just do Ryan's job, right? And so I had including my wife that was basically raising kids and running the business by herself.
So how long do you think you spent drinking and chasing the alcoholic high?
It was almost exactly 6 or 7 years, almost exactly.
Almost exactly. 6 or 7.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was about 36 to 42. And so, but it was like all the things that came with being an alcoholic. And again, I would put on the face honesty, like there was no honesty there. Everybody thought I was doing fine. Everybody, with the exception of people who really were connected with me, like my wife or like my mom and stuff, that the real connections knew, right? And I wasn't fooling them. I tried to many times,
Well, we talk about it. Addiction is a family disease, or anybody who's close to us gets wrapped up in the addiction process. And I know that enabler is a harsh word maybe for the people you're thinking of because you love and care about them. But I think it's okay to apply that to those situations, to those people, because it's not a accusation or a put down. All of us, through our good intentions of trying to help someone, can end up enabling their addictive process, right? And so it sounds like you had people that loved and cared about you, whether it was at work or at home, who were trying to help, right? And they're picking up after Ryan, so to speak, everywhere you go. And so in a way they were enabling. And they were seeing the real Ryan, whereas you were playing two-face, right? Like the Batman villain. You one face for the world and then one face for home.
Yeah, I love that enabling because nobody enables out of hate.
Oh, it's always out of love.
That's a good point, Casey.
It's out of love. You know what I mean? No one's like, man, I hate that person. I'm going to make sure they have all the drugs and alcohol they need.
I know my personality. I'd be an amazing enabler.
Yeah. I mean,
because I just love to help people.
Yeah.
And so I think it's good for the listeners to realize this is a family disease. And if you're not the person using the substance, you're probably in that other camp. You're probably and it's great to realize that, just like it's important for the user to realize, I have a problem. It's important for the family and friends to go, I have a problem too. I'm enabling this.
So how does the run of alcohol come to an end?
Very abruptly. What happened was I started to realize, nobody Google, if you're a normie or somebody that can drink alcohol and put it down, nobody Googles, am I an alcoholic? Right. Like nobody.
I can tell you right now, I've Googled that, and I was as young as 30 when I Googled it.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, well, again, thinking that was just the people on 4 South, Pioneer Park. That's not me. Like, I'm not an alcoholic. And people in my life, like my mom and my wife, were like, yeah, you're an alcoholic. You need help. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I haven't lost anything. I'm doing fine. Like, you're fine. Be quiet. Like, you're provided for. Let me do my thing. I'm an adult. Right. And I got really really shovey pushy about people trying to encroach on my tool.
Yeah. Don't tell me what to do or how to live my life. I've said those words exactly.
Yeah.
Do I tell you how to live your life and you don't tell me how to live mine?
Yeah.
I mean, as dumb as it is, that's what you do as an addict. Yeah. It's like, hey, what do you care? This is my body.
Extreme defensiveness.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Extreme defensiveness. And to the point where, like, if friends are reaching out and like, hey, man, how can I help? Block. Like, I don't want to deal with that.
I don't have time for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's sad. It's sad. So what happened was my good friend John Red,
had him on the podcast.
Yeah, he's been on the podcast. He's an amazing individual. I had seen him in his addiction. I had no idea what addiction was, but I knew he had it. And I'd help him in the car at times, and he was somebody that I was like, oh, he's got a problem. Well, one time he's in my neighborhood. He lives a few houses away, and he shows up, and he's like talking to Casey, like talking to you, Dr. Matt. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, this is not the same John Red I know. And it was like, his eyes are white, and he's laughing, and I'm like, what is going on? I don't even know who this dude is, and I remember thinking, I need to talk to him, And
so you're used to him in his addiction. That's how you knew him. And then he shows up one day, and it's like this new, improved, bright-eyed person that you didn't recognize.
Yeah, and I think he's full of it. I think he's fooling like everybody in the world.
What drug is he on?
Yeah.
But he's not fooling you.
Yeah, and not going to fool me. And I really thought he was full of it. And so under false pretense, I take him to lunch for business purposes. And I tell him, hey, man, I think I'm an alcoholic. And his reaction stunned me because I was so used to the shame and the moral failure and the, like, you can't tell anybody about this. And he just, got this quirky little smile, like, John, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And he got this, and he's like, okay, now what? And wait, what?
It didn't faze him at all.
Bro, I just told you that, like, I'm the most abject moral failure ever. And you're just like, cool? He's like, well, I mean, to get you help. How can I help? And I was amazed at the non-judgment. I was amazed at the no shame. I was like blown away, because I didn't have anybody in my life that wasn't just an abject failure. And so for him to be like, cool, let me walk you through it. I'm like, okay, we can do this, right? But then it got worse, because then I was like, it seems too easy. Right. So, and then I push back.
Or you put it off for a little bit because you're not really ready to make the commitment
Exactly.
yet.
That willingness wasn't there.
You can go back and you can talk to your wife. You can talk to your family. Go, hey, I'm talking to somebody. We've got some.
So we call that contemplation, right?
Yeah.
You're in that stage of contemplation, not ready to take any action. And when you contemplate, sometimes you ebb and flow. Like, oh, this seems like a really good idea.
Yes.
But no, it's not a good idea.
Well, you know what it became for me? It became a way to get mom, wife, kids off my back. Mm-hmm. Talk to John. He knows what it's like. Talk to John. And I'd show up to AA meetings and not be there. Just putting my butt in the couch and just like
going through the motions.
Yeah, I'm not them. Like, I heard that guy's story. I'm not that bad. Right? Yeah. So I'm obviously not an alcoholic. And then that's when I got separated from my wife and kids. And decided that, like, okay, if they're going to take my one tool away, I'm going to go be my man. Like, I'd be the man that I want to be. And I got to tell you, Dr. Matt, like, I had this one therapist that was a super enabler who was telling me that, hey, man, you just need to do whatever makes you happy.
Oh, that therapist. Yeah, right? I know that therapist.
And I'm like, yeah, that's what I thought.
You get me.
Yeah. That's what I thought too.
Do what feels right.
Yes. Simple. It wasn't do the next right thing. It was do whatever feels good for you.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I'll continue to see
my every want all the time. That's how I'm going to fix this.
Great. Yeah. So I came back and I told John. I said, well, John, me and my therapist have a plan. Have you heard about people's plans before?
Yeah, that's great. We got a plan.
We joke about it in AA, like, hey, tell us about your plans. So I've got this plan, John, and he looked at me, and with the most sincere look, he's like, I got to tell you, man, I'm not on board. And I'm like, well, doesn't matter, because you're not a licensed therapist,
and you're not in the plan.
You're not in the plan. And then, so I went and got an Airbnb, and I lived by myself for some time, and was acting like I was 21 years old. Like, I seriously, it was like I was in college again, but a different person, right?
This time you weren't the designated driver.
We call that emotional regression. So when we hit, especially when we're kind of midlife, late 30s to 50s, in that sometimes we hit this period where we feel like I don't really know who I am and what makes me happy. Mm-hmm. Maybe I've built a lot of great things, but I haven't built myself up. And so that can actually be an exciting turning point for a lot of people, where they dig deep and they make changes that make their life what they want it to be and what it should be. And then sometimes we have an emotional regression where we're like, you know what would make me happy? If I could be 21 again, and I could act like a 21-year-old idiot, and that I would have no responsibility, and I can buy a Corvette and, pierce my ears or whatever you do. So you do that, and we have a fancy term for that. It's called midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis. Yeah. So I'm the stereotypical midlife crisis. I'm going back and doing whatever I want, drinking when I want, going and hanging out at bars whenever I want. Nobody to tell me, to keep me accountable, right? Nobody to keep me honest. And I thought that's what makes me happy, right? So I'm doing this whole thing, this bachelor thing, all the while my kids are upset, like, and I could see it on their faces when I'd come back. Like, even though I was drunk 95, 98% of the time, I could still see their faces. Mm-hmm. And I could still see the hurt. And I could not let that go. I could, as much as I wanted to just drink that away, that was undrinkable. Because I knew at that point that that's actually what makes me happy. is being with them. And this alcohol is causing me to not be with them. So it was, went on somewhat of a last hurrah down to Phoenix, feeling crappy the whole time about this, even the decision to leave there. And came home and I saw my kids, came straight to the house, saw my kids, and this resolve on my wife's face was like, "You're not welcome here. Like, I don't need you." And I'd never seen that before. She'd been so long of just like, we'll work it out, we'll figure it out, and now it was like, no, we're done. We're done. And I'd never been hit with that before. And so I immediately texted John and I said, "Man, I think I need rehab." And John found me a place like the next day. And he asked me before I left to pray about it. And I have to tell you this part of the story because it's important, because I'd had such a bad relationship with God ever since that, like towards the oxycontin addiction, that I'd lost connection with my higher power. Like God was, it seemed stupid to me. Like I got to the point where I'm smarter than God, right? And plus I got like the, I know this is a family broadcast, it's the F it alls, I just felt like I had gone so far down, so much shame, so much like sin in my life that I can't ever get back. Like, so might as well enjoy the ride, right? Like Grateful Dead.
It's a hopelessness.
Yeah. And it was this hopelessness that I remember feeling so intensely. And he goes, "Why don't you pray about whether or not you need to go to rehab?" And I was resentful towards John for that. I was like, "You don't know me. Like, I've done so much in my addiction that you think I can talk to God? Like, you think that he cares about me?" And I remember waking up the next day, I did what he said. And I had this this most intense feeling of rehab's where I need to be. And that everything with the company, with the kids, with everything was going to be okay. Because I was in my head about losing clients. Casey, I'd built up this company, and I was just like, I have to call each and every one of them and tell them I'm going to be gone for at least 30 days. Just finish me now, But I did it because John said, if you do it, you'll be surprised. And I didn't lose one client over that. Everyone that I was honest with and said, "Hey, I've got a problem and I need some help," they said, "Go take care of you and your family, and we'll be here in 30 days. Or whatever time you need. We're not going anywhere."
That's impressive.
That's huge.
Never in my wildest dreams did I think anybody would say that, and let alone like this whole book of business of clients, So
now it's not just your friend John, but all these clients are responding in a supportive, non-judgmental way.
Yeah, and I'd been this perfectionist all my life, and now I'm like telling them that, no, this guy that you thought you knew is actually like an alcoholic. I don't think you heard me. Like, no. Because they can deal with honesty. People can handle honesty, And when we give people a chance to connect, a chance to empathize, and I really feel like there's like the spiritual connection that is like, go get them, yeah, we're here for you.
So now your friends, family, and clients are enabling you with love.
Yeah.
To get the help that you need.
Yeah.
And you go in and you do 30 days.
Yeah.
You come back out.
I didn't want it to be that long. I wanted to be the first, I'm going to do rehab.
I'm going to do 30 days in 10 days.
I wanted to get it done,
Yeah.
But it was...
Set a record.
Yeah. With John being associated with that particular rehab, he's like, "No, I don't want you leaving here until you do a fourth and fifth step." And for those of you that don't know, that's kind of getting rid of the garbage, right?
Yeah.
And all those things that I'm like, well, I've gone down the path so far that I'm no good anymore. I'm not worthy. Nobody wants me. God took care of that, and it's the most amazing feeling. When I got done with my 5th step, I was like, I can breathe again. I have this new life, and felt like I was completely born again, and felt like I've got something to give back now.
So how long have you been sober?
I've been sober for a year and almost 4 months.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Like we've had a lot of people on the podcast, service is an important part to the recovery. You're embarking on a new adventure.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, I think that it's important to know that I still go to my local AA meetings. I still work with sponsees, but we had this opportunity, John and I, to really make a difference. The way that this came about, I wish I had another hour to tell you about this, but the way that this whole place came about in Mountain Green, Morgan, Utah, is nothing less than a miracle in so many ways. I mean, we've gone and journaled it down. John's got it on his phone right now. But essentially all these things lined up, and we walked into this beautiful home and said, people can heal here. And it's just this beautiful place up in Mountain Green. And I think that, you look at how John Redd does recovery.
Yeah.
And I'm not John Redd, but I mimic that, and I mimic people like Brian Heaton and the people in my lives that are doing recovery the right way. Casey Scott. I look at them and go, hey, I like that about them, and I want other people to have that. So when I talk to sponsees and when I talk to people that are around addiction, that's what I want to be. I want to be that resource for them to help them out whatever way I can.
Now, the Recovery Center's not open yet, and when it does open up, we'll have you and John back on the podcast.
I appreciate that.
I'm proud.
Yeah.
I'm from Morgan.
Yeah.
I'm proud to know that you guys have chosen that spot. Mountain Green is honestly one of the most beautiful places on the earth.
Well, that was interesting because you said to him, why'd you choose that?
Yeah, before the show.
He goes, what a beautiful place to heal.
Yeah.
And I remember that. I mean, that just hit me in the heart. I was like, that is...
Well, I know exactly where it is, and I can picture in my mind the exact view, and it is a peaceful, beautiful valley, and the spot you guys have chosen is going to be a wonderful place for healing. So I'm excited that you guys are there.
Yeah, we really feel like God picked it for us. We were just, John uses the thing, he goes, these two idiots that are just coloring by numbers. God tells us which number is next, and we go do that.
It's a pretty good formula.
Yeah. And there is something to be said about being in the flow of whatever God has intended for our lives, and that's what we just try to do now.
So I've got to ask, how's the family?
They're good. They're really good. It's funny because like my kids, who have had a hard time with dad being on podcasts and stuff like that, they're realizing that like when they give their friends and family and Facebook associates a chance to hear about what's going on, people are amazing. Like the first podcast I did, I was so in my head about, I'm
going to share my story.
I'm going to share my story, and somebody's going to figure it out, right? And be like, that's not acceptable. But everybody comes back and says, me too, or I've got a friend, or wow, that's a powerful story, And so it's like God gives us this like boost of energy to like keep doing that, keep doing that. And I think with my family now, they're far enough separated from it that they can laugh about the idiot that dad used to be. Because my
kids still talk about the time I went to church camp, because that's what they called rehab.
Church camp.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because it sounded a lot cooler than saying my dad went to rehab.
Yeah,
They'd
church
be like,
camp.
My dad went to church camp.
Yeah, that's so long ago, at least a year and 3 months ago, that they're like laughing about it now. We can have those conversations that don't hurt so bad, and we're able to make new memories. Right?
Yeah, that's great.
Making new memories is so important, because a lot of times I don't like the word trigger, but when you go into a place that you've had a bad experience before, and Las Vegas, Lake Powell, all these other places that we've had bad experiences at. We can go in there and make new memories. All of a sudden, that's a safe place for us, and Dad's still sober.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love that too. And I love the fact that you've been able to break down sort of the stigma of addiction in an intergenerational way, meaning you've taught your kids something that is so valuable for them to learn. Because when we were growing up, and you shared this in your story, you didn't really know anything about addiction or substance abuse. So when people were struggling with it, you had your, stigma-based, thoughts about it, which didn't really help serve you when you were faced with your own addiction. And so now your kids, Casey's kids, so many people are growing up now with an education about it, that's very, very helpful. I think that generationally things are changing in an exciting way.
I do too. I've noticed it over the past few years where, when you look at high school till today, it's completely different.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of room to go, right?
Oh, sure.
Morgan County's got a lot of room to go.
We're pretty close to perfect in Morgan, but we have had a few Morganites on the show, haven't we?
But I will say it's going in the right direction.
I think so too. Well, I thank you very much for stopping by and sharing your story. It really made me happy. I mean, we laughed. We had a good time.
Ryan's got a nice positive energy. And what I love about guys like Ryan and John and people like that are out there giving back in the community, I almost want to go to the rehab, take 30 days. I'm not an alcoholic, but it would be great to just
I tell people
soak up their energy and do some positive, good stuff for yourself.
I tell people all the time, if you can get 30 to 45 days in a rehab without an addiction, take it.
Do it.
Because it's amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
They take you to the workout, they give you food.
But it's so
you
positive.
See a therapist.
And I think that might be my vacation.
Some of the meetings get a little intense, but you know what I mean?
That's good though, too. That's good too.
You know what I mean? And you keep it real. The thing I love about you most is your honesty. I really do. And honesty for me is a superpower. And I love the fact that you own it. And I think you're doing wonderful things. And when that rehab center gets up and running, you and John both have an open invitation to come back and talk about all the wonderful things that you're going to do out of there.
We really feel like we're on God's errand. And I mean that sincerely.
And when you guys have an opening ceremony, let us know, because
for sure,
that's my hometown. I'd love to come support you guys.
For sure. You're the first invite.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for stopping by and listening to the podcast today. It is Project Recovery. And in case you forgot, Project Recovery is what?
It's a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.